Harihi Om Gananam Tva Ganapatigum Havamahe Kavyo Kavinamupamashravastamo Jyeshtarajam Brahmanaham Brahmanaspatah Anashunvalno Devasidasadanam Prano Devi Saraswati Vaje Virvajinivati Deenamamitrayavatho Ganeshaya Namaha Saraswatyai Namaha Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Ramanujadaya Patram Jnana Vairagya Bhushanam Srimat Venkatanathayam Vande Vedanta Deshikam Lakshmi Nata Samarambha Nada Yamuna Madhyamam Asmad Acharya Paryantham Vande Guru Paramparam Om Apadhama Pahatharam Datharam Sarvasampatham Lokabhiramam Shri Ramam Bhuyo Bhuyo Namamyaham Ramaya Ramabhadraya Ramachandraya Vedase Raghunathaya Nathaya Sithayam Pataye Namaha Om Shri Rama Rama Rameti Rame Rame Manorame Sahasranama Tattuliyam Ramanama Varanane Ramanama Varanane Nama Ithi Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramarphanamastu Astika Namo Namaha Suswagatam and welcome on yet another journey that hopefully will catapult us from some level of ignorance, some arrogance, to some level of elevation where we are clearly exposed to the light of wisdom or jnana. So today is the introduction and the background to the essence of the Ramayana, right? So it's peripheral. We haven't gone into yet. And then the next 7 weeks after this week, every week I'll be taking one chapter, which is, 7 chapters called kanda, or books or chapters each week. The next week I'll start Bala Kanda, then Ayodhya Kanda, then Aranya Kanda, like that I'll go for 7 weeks. And then the 9th week, right? Today is 1 plus 7, 8, and then the week after that is the 9th week. We review, we consolidate, and it's a general Q&A session. Obviously, every week there will be some time, hopefully a few minutes for people to ask me questions related to what I have said, right? So what are the learning objectives? In anything that we do in terms of learning, there must be a goal, there must be an aim, there must be an objective. So the objective here is not who told the story, when was the story told, where was it written, where is known. The story is the learning in each of the chapters or the kandas. What can I get from each of this kanda? Okay, please shift your mindset to what can I get out of this? What can I get out of this? What can I get out of this? Every week when you hear me, that should be the question that is reverberating in your mind. Not who wrote this? Who's the authority on this? Did Rama really exist? No. That's not the question. When your teacher taught you in school, did you ask the teacher, where did you get this from? No, you accepted it because it is knowledge that is meant to make you more knowledgeable. That is the same thing here, right? So don't question the source. Take the lesson and move on, right? So that's the spiritual learning. What can we get? What can we receive in terms of spiritual learning? And more importantly, how that spiritual learning lends itself to your own personal transformation, right? I did Bhajagovindam with you. I did Bhagavad Gita with you. I told you all about karma. I went on duty, devotion. I went on dharma. I went on faith and fear. All of this should have moved you, right? Moved you a little bit from where you were to where you are. And this should move you a little bit more, right? Otherwise, you need to ask yourself, why am I doing this? What have I benefited from, right? I spent all that time listening to this man. How have I benefited? How have I benefited? That's the question you should ask, right? So Like I said to you in the Gita, the object of me doing this is not to teach you how to chant, the Bhagavad Gita shlokas when I did Gita, and certainly not the Ramayana shlokas, because it's too much, right? If you thought, 18 chapters and 701 verses in the Gita was too much, well, let me tell you, there are 500, what we call paragraphs of this epic poetry and more than 25,000 verses in the Ramayana. So let's just take the essence, apply it to our daily lives, engage in some personal transformation, and reach the destination, right? So what is the purpose of Ramayana? You see, it's a formula. Ramayana is a formula for spiritual path and enlightenment. The drama that you see unfolding in the Ramayana in terms of the story in each of the kandas, right? Like what happened in Balakanda, what happened in Ayodhya Kanda, what happened in Aranya Kanda, all of that actually teaches man on all four levels of life. I'm talking about physical level, mental level, social level, and spiritual level. Physical, mental, social, spiritual. How we should behave, how we should carry ourselves, and how we should live life. This is the inner purpose of Ramayana. So don't focus so much on the story. Focus on the lesson that the story is trying to tell us, right? The range, Ramayana in its full range, right? Whether from beginning until the end, it transcends the milestones of history. Excuse me. It is the eternal play of human evolution, and it teaches you about duty and dharma, faith and surrender. And this is why I use these topics as a prerequisite for us to launch ourselves into the Ramayana. This is talking about dharma, righteousness, right? So, as it happened, as I did karma with you before I started Gita, the same karmic consequences gave birth to what we now know as Ramayana. Why? Because everybody had played some role, isn't it? Ravana's boon of invulnerability to the gods, demigods, animals, and a mix of any of these combinations, right? Hence, we had Rama avatar coming, right? Rama, of course, as I've said before in my talks, was born as a normal human being, the seventh avatar in the lineage of the Dashavataram. Of course, this great work was written or authored by Valmiki Maharishi, right? Pursuant to the Indian cultural traits. The language was in Sanskrit. It is an epic poetry, recited in the form of prose, poetry. And time, right? There are many variations, between 100 and 550 BC, right? And of course, the concept is dharma, right? Conduct and consequences of adharma. Well, there is, unrighteous conduct, right? And Krishna took that saying, yada yada hi dharmasya, whenever there's a decline in righteousness, I will incarnate. Same thing before that, one avatar before that, one yuga before that, Rama had come, okay? So now I want to start by talking about the characters. Who are the characters, right? If you have a film or a theatrical event, right? First you want to see, okay, who's the hero, who's the heroine, subplot, who's the comedian, like that, right? Let us see who is what and what their role signifies actually, right? Let's look at that. Rama, exceptional power, born as a mere human, but the very word Rama, Ra-A-Ma, 3 syllables, right, stands for fire, light, and tranquility. Fire as in Agni, light as in the sun, tranquility as in the moon. Agnihi, Suryaha, Chandraha, Ra-A-Ma, right? By chanting the name of Rama, fire will extinguish your sins, right? Light will lift the darkness. Fire, light, and tranquility, I said. Agni, Surya, and Chandra, right? And of course, tranquility. Emotional turbulence will be replaced by peace. Hence, Rama. So you don't say Rama, you say Rama. So the Ra is extended a little bit so that, all these 3 fantastic energy forces are invoked, right? Of course, the word Ra and the word Ma, right? When you take, Ra comes from Narayana. Ra is the second syllables, Narayana, right? And Ma comes from Maheshwara. So when you say Rama, you are actually calling both Vishnu and Shiva. This is fantastic because Rama actually is a name that brings together, combines, the dualistic powers of the Vaishnava and the Shaiva system into one. So you can't say, oh, I'm this, or I'm that, or that is Vaishnava and the Shaiva. Well, how do you explain Rama then? Rama is representing both. In fact, both of them had a role to play in this avatar coming. And of course, Swami has told us about Dasharatha, right? Dasharatha. Dasha means 10, Ratha means chariot, right? Now, what this means from a spiritual perspective is 10 here represents the 10 senses, the 5 organic senses and the 5 senses of action, right? Sense of action, sense of perception. And of course, Ayodhya. Ayodhya means a city which is impenetrable, right? This basically translates to the body and the mind, right? Permission is needed from the mind or the intelligence first before anything can enter into the body, obviously through your senses. How fantastic is that, right? Permission must be given by the intellect that should actually control the mind. Go back to my Bhagavad Gita, the first lecture I did with you, where I explained to you the chariot. And I said to you, Krishna represents intellect, Arjuna represents buddhi. Intellect must determine how the buddhi acts. Okay, the 3 wives of Dasharatha, Kausalya, Sumitra, and Kaikeyi, represent the 3 gunas: Sattvic, Rajasic, Tamasic. The 4 sons of Dasharatha, Rama, Bharata, Lakshmana, and Shatrugna, they represent the 4 Vedas: Rig Veda, Rama, Yajurveda, Bharata, Samaveda, Shatraguna, and Atharvana Veda. Samaveda is Lakshmana and Atharvana Veda, Shatraguna. These 4 characters, Rama, Bharata, Lakshmana, and Shatrugna, also represent the 4 Purusharthas: Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. These are the 4 objectives that every individual, you and I, must strive to fulfill in our lifetime, right? Sita Devi represents Brahmanyana, absolute wisdom, Brahmanyana, right? But the point here is, even though you are endowed with Brahmanyana, something will come and test you from time to time. This is called desire. Go back to my Bhaja Govindam lectures, right? Desire will come, right? Unless you desire desire, it will disturb you. And just as she was fascinated, when I say she, I mean Sita Devi was fascinated by the golden deer. Golden deer, of course, we know who that was, Maricha, right? Anyway, and she wanted to possess it. So when desire gets in the way of absolute wisdom, Brahmanyana becomes deluded. And it will give you consequences, the karmic consequences, right? So Rama went to look for her. This means when jnana is thwarted by desire, it separates, just as Sita was separated from Rama, right? The separation led Rama to go in search of Sita. And then, of course, he came across a mountain called Rishyamukha. Rishyamukha obviously tested Rama. I mean, I'll talk more about this when I go into the respective cantos, right? But setting the scene, as it were, right? Rishyamukha mountain represents detachment or vairagya. So again, Rama had to go through certain things, detachment before he satsangatvam nitsangatve. Remember my Bhaja Govindam, right? So Rama sought the friendship of Sugriva. Sugriva represents discrimination. And Sugriva relied on Hanuman. Hanuman represents courage, among other things, right? Both qualities, i.e. discrimination and courage, are essential to spiritual seekers. And of course, Vali represents wickedness and cruelty. And Rama destroys Vali by using these 2 qualities of discrimination, courage, bravery, those kind of things. Ahalya, wife of Gautama Rishi, owing to a curse, she became a stone. And of course, the curse was to be lifted only when the feet of a pure human being touches her. And so we sing that song, isn't it? Ahalyo taraka Rama, Sarpa Vimochana Rama. We add over Shirdi Purisha Rama, Satya Sai Shri Parandama. Ahalya was cursed and was told only when the feet of a pure human being touches her, she will regain her original self. And of course, in the time when Rama, Lakshmana, and Sita were in the, Vanavasa, and Shabari was also the same thing. Of course, Shabari is another story, right? Rama's feet touched this little rock and she became Ahalya. That's why it says Rama Nama Taraka Nama. Taraka Nama, right? And Swami has often said, pain is actually an interval between two pleasures. Swami has often said that, right? And so it's an interval between two pains. Right? Pleasure is an interval between two pains. Pain is a pleasure, is an interval between two pleasures. So they both, so it's like the yin and the yang, the energy, right? So Hanuman crossed the ocean. The ocean here represents the ocean of delusion when clarity entered his mind. And clarity entered his mind simply by chanting the name of Rama. Rama Nama Taraka Nama. That's why I said to you earlier when I chanted the mantra, Sri Rama Rama Rameti Rame Rame Manorame Sahasranama Tattulyam Rama Nama Varanane Rama Nama Varanane Nama Ithi. That means chanting, this is also part of the Vishnu Sahasranama. Right? Where he says chanting the name of Rama once is equivalent to Sahasra, 1,000 times, right? So Rama, actually, when you look at it from a dharmic perspective, now I spoke about dharma about 3 weeks ago. I said to you, look at it from a dharmic perspective, right? Rama, from a dharmic perspective, actually fulfilled every part of this role, whether he was the ideal son, yes, ideal brother, yes, ideal husband. Some of you might question me, but I welcome these questions when I do, that part. In the cantos, right? Because he didn't believe his wife. He thought he made her walk on the fire, right? All these, please ask me the question, and I have answers for you, right? So ideal husband Rama was, ideal friend he was, ideal enemy he was, and the ideal king. Now, if you and I cannot perform our different roles with the same amount of equanimity, then why do you fault Rama, who was born as a very normal human being? Do you not have quarrels with your kith and kin, with your husband, with your wife? So why couldn't Rama have similar quarrels? We know now that Rama was born as a 7th avatar. But Rama, when he was born, he didn't know he was God. That was a sankalpa. He didn't know, and neither did everyone else who was involved. And I'll come to that shortly. Nobody knew they were God. Unlike Krishna. Krishna knew he was God. He knew why he took that birth, and he was born with entire powers. Not Rama. They forgot until Vishwamitra had to come at the end. Vasishtha had to come at the end and say, this is why you were born. Now it's finished. Go back. Right? Then, of course, a different yuga, a different Dwapara came after that. And, of course, Krishna Avatar came. Okay? So, what do certain things that have happened in Ramayana represent? So, we've looked at some of the characteristics, right? Let's look at some of the events holistically, right? This is an introduction. So you have a nice background. Next week, when we go into Balakanda, you already know certain things, right? And I've also sent the Ramakatha Rasa Vahini to Brother Ganesh, who will be sending you the materials, right? The 2 books to read, PDF version. And of course, every week when I finish, I will send you something to foster and forge your understanding. So I'll ask you some questions. I mean, questions are from a reflective basis, right? From a reflective basis for you to look at and think, okay, this has happened. Doctor has asked this question. Oh, how do I tackle this? Where do I come from? Right? Okay. Rama, when he was asked to go to the forest, Rama's exile to the forest. What does that represent? Not at that time, not Rama's time. Today, for you and me, what does it represent? Today, 2021, February 14th. Right? Don't tell me it's Valentine's Day. I know it is, but we're not looking at that. His exile to the forest symbolizes the life path that we have to take, right? It's called Nitsangapatha. That means the path of renunciation. Satsangatvam nitsangatve, nitsangatvam nirmohatve, nirmohatvam nischalatatvam, nischalatatvam jivan mukti. There you go. So it's telling us to move away from satsanga, attachment, to nitsanga, renunciation, right? Or detachment. Because you can't renunciate if you haven't detached. right? The golden deer, earlier I said to you, it represents desire. So there has to be some element of control of our desires in order for us to rise spiritually, right? That's the golden deer. So you see, when you look at it, all of this from a symbolic perspective, and you take that symbol and put it into practice and apply it in your daily lives, then you are living the Ramayana, not just listening to somebody telling you a story. And this is certainly not a story. This is how life should be lived. With duty, with devotion, with dharma, with faith, without fear, with total surrender. And these are things I've covered in my 3 weeks of duty, devotion, dharma, faith, fear, and surrender, which are all on YouTube, by the way, brothers and sisters. So you can search for it. Sita's abduction. What is that? I told you Sita is Brahmajnana, right? Wisdom, intelligence, right? Devotion, all in one, Brahmajnana. And of course, when she was abducted by Ravana, she was separated from Rama. So the cosmic intelligence, the cosmic wisdom was separated from the cosmic self. When the cosmic wisdom, when you lose wisdom, you actually become non-functionable, right? And this also shows the consequences of attachment. Rama was a normal human being, right? Rama actually, if you read Valmiki Maharishi, the book is somewhere, I'll show you the book next week, right? He actually cried. And a lot of people ask me, hey, how can Rama cry? Rama was God. Rama didn't know he was God. Some of you may be God's walking, but you don't know that you're God. That's why Swami says, I know I am God. You should know that you are also God. I am God, you are God. The difference is I know, but you don't. Like that, Rama didn't know anything. So why do we expect him to have godly attributes and godly characteristics when he is a normal human being? Can that be expected of you and me? No, you will say no under any circumstances. So why do we put that obligation on Rama? So this is Sita's abduction. When wisdom and self are separated, you become non-functionable. Right? So that is the lesson for you and me. Killing of Jatayu by Ravana. Jatayu represents the epitome of loyalty, right? The king of the bird. That is why when the epitome of loyalty was killed by Ravana, the whole world was plundered into temporary darkness. Wind did not blow, the sun lost its luster, So basically the lesson there is when wisdom is lost in the world, nature will also degenerate. What a fantastic saying. These are lessons that we should live life in this way, right? Rama meeting the apes. Again, in a few minutes, I'll tell you how man and ape came together to defeat such a powerful, invincible person, Ravana, right? So Rama promised Sugriva that he will, I'm cutting to the chase, right? That he will help Sugriva against Bali and then make him king of the monkeys, right? King of the Vanara kingdom. In return, he will help with his, monkey army to go and look for Sita. That was the arrangement or agreement, if you like. So Bali here represents intellect with ego, ahamkara. Bali represents ahamkara. Sugriva also represents intellect, but that intellect needs support to surrender. Hence Rama and Hanuman. Hanuman, of course, mind is devotion, faith, Shraddha, and bhakti, devotion. So faith and devotion. That is Hanuman. And of course, courage and bravery and all of that, right? Invincible, Hanuman. Hanuman also did not know of his powers. He was, cursed, not cursed, rather, an injunction was placed that he will not remember. Because, in his youth time, he was very, very mischievous, right? So Indra came and said, because you're doing all these problems, you almost ate up the sun because you thought it was a mango, right? You're going to forget all the superb powers that you have, right? Until a time comes when someone reminds you of the purpose of your avatar or your birth. And naturally, when he was meditating just before he flew, he meditated and he got all his powers. So Hanuman is mindfulness, faithfulness, devotion, faith, courage, all of that. The army of the apes, this is very important. Army of the apes represent the mind of man. The monkey army can be compared with our mind, with thoughts running all over the place, all over the time, jumping from this branch to that branch, this branch of thought to another branch of thought, another branch of thought to another branch of thought. And then we sit down and say, no peace, no peace, no peace. Monkey. So learn to control our monkey mind, right? Hanuman flying over the sea, the supernatural powers. I told you, he forgot it, then he got it back when the time was right. So many times, people who talk to me tell me, why I'm going through all these years, suffering, pain, this. I said, when the time is right, everything will happen. Valmiki did not become a rishi overnight. He was a dacoit. He was a thief. He was a highway robber. But look how many, change that how much of change he had to go through in order to become Valmiki Maharishi. Same with Vishwamitra, he was a king, normal king. And he became a rishi, not happy. This rishi, that rishi, this rishi, that rishi. Finally, he became Brahma Rishi, Maharishi. Then only he was, So that is, and the three brothers in Lanka, Ravana, Vibhishana, and Kumbhakarna, right? Representing the three qualities of Sattvic, Rajasic, Tamasic, right? Ravana is obviously Rajasic, Vibhishana is Sattvic, and Kumbhakarna is Tamasic. 6 months he's awake and 6 months he sleeps, So this, when I did Gita with you, I told you how these three qualities affect the mind of man, right? When I did Deva, Asura, Sampat, the qualities of Deva and Asura. So Hanuman finding Sita Devi is devotion, finds wisdom so that it can connect with the cosmic self. Finish, right? So Sita Devi, wisdom, Brahmajnani, Hanuman, bhakti, Shraddha. So when bhakti and Shraddha is in the right level, it will automatically connect with wisdom. The wisdom will take it to a higher level, right? And of course, this devotion is required to find that wisdom so that the wisdom can help you, propel yourself through this ego, revenge, sensory pleasures, all of that. Ravana, 10 heads, 4 Vedas and 6 Shastras. That's what he represents. Hanuman and Lakshmana, when Hanuman went to get the Sanjeevini for Lakshmana, right? Because Ravana's son, Meghananda, he attacked Lakshmana. So the medicinal herb represents natural resources. So in a modern world that is plagued with different kinds of problems, this is telling us there is always a natural way out, especially in the new age, right? Rama scaling Ravana. Actually, it is very, very interesting because when I was reading, in one part where after all of that, they go back to Ayodhya, right? Rama, Sita, Lakshmana all go back to Ayodhya. And then, after the festivities, the mother asks him, Kausalya asks him, so you actually killed Rama? Oh my God. And then Rama corrects Kausalya and he says, no, mother, I did not kill Ravana. Ravana was killed by his ego. How fantastic is that, right? So, doesn't matter how learned we are, right? As I said to you earlier, Ravana represents 4 Vedas and 6 Shastras, 4 plus 6, 10, hence 10 heads. Dashamukha, right? Dashamukhi, Dashamashtaka, like that. The moment we do not use that knowledge and wisdom in the right path, i.e. dharma, righteousness, then end of the day, it will kill you, right? Rama, Sita's collective return to Ayodhya at the end after the war, of the Yuddha Khanda, right? This is what we call Uttarakhanda, the last book. They're going back. This represents, of course, the crowning of Ram, right, back in Ayodhya. The Rama Rajya begins at that time. Rama is cosmic self and Sita is cosmic wisdom. So when these two merge, then the ruling is fantastically dharmic, conscious righteousness, right? Conscious righteousness. That means, you'll have everything. You live in peace, joy, happiness, bliss. Everything comes when the cosmic self and the cosmic wisdom unites. Then you have 100% complete unity of thought, word, and deed. So that is a little bit about the characters and a little bit about some of the events that happen, right? So you can connect to a bit of reality. This is a reality check. You know, a lot of people say, brother, you're going to do this Ramayana, right? Are you going to tell us the same story like what we see in Hotstar or one of these Asian channels? So the story and the serials on TV and everywhere else is unimportant, right? Don't follow the story. Follow the lesson, right? And obviously, anything that is on commercial TV is commercialized, right? So the story is stretched or elongated or something is put in there which is not. You want to get anything, primary source of information, right? Do your research and read from the original texts. So what is the lesson that we can learn from each of the characters? What is their respective attitude? What can we take and apply in our own life? Like Jambavan, the bear who lives with the monkeys. So what's the connection between bear and monkeys? So what can we take from the bear and what can we take from the monkeys to inculcate in our daily lives? So you see, it's a good thing that I'm doing this Ramayana after delivering, on the greatness of the Gita. Because, if you had followed me throughout the 11 weeks of Bhagavad Gita, the journey, you'll be able to see the similarities and the dharmic lessons that come across or that came across in Gita that will again come across in the Ramayana. The values are overlapping. The values don't change. Truth is truth. Whether you say it in Satya Yuga or Dwapara Yuga or Treta Yuga or Kali Yuga, truth is truth. Ekam Sat. That is it. That is one truth. And that truth is called God. Okay. So Ramayana focuses on life's uncertainties. Right? Ramayana focuses on life's uncertainties and the different types of relationship. Exactly what we have. Right? Whatever problems you have in your life, it has already taken place in the Ramayana. It has already taken place in the Ramayana. And always there is an answer that's available, right? So we just need to look in the right place. And hence the Bible says, seek and you shall find, right? So hence I'm going back to reiterate why I did duty and devotion, why I did dharma, and why I did faith, fear, and surrender, right? It's a prerequisite for us to understand. Okay, just like I did karma before Mahābhārata, right? And of course, everything that I have done until now, right? You will see it coming and lending itself to your understanding of what is happening here, right? So attachment, for example, is not a recent problem. I spoke about attachment when I did Bhaja Govindam. I spoke about attachment when I did karma. I spoke about attachment when I did Bhagavad Gita. And certainly I will speak about attachment when I am doing Ramayana. The whole reason why Rama had to go to the forest was because of one person's attachment. That is, of course, Kaikeyi, right? Now, the problem of attachment, it creates either elation or sorrow. And this clouds your sense of discrimination. And when your discrimination is clouded, viveka is clouded, you tend to make wrong decisions. And that is the main cause of human misery. Okay, so what did the Gita teach and what does the Ramayana teach? What do they both teach us? How to live in the world. This is the lesson, right? Take away. How to live in the world without being touched by sorrow. See, Rama was fine until Sita was abducted. He was happy. It didn't matter that he was not in the grand palace of Ayodhya. It didn't matter that he was in an absolute forest with nothing except the clothes that they were wearing. It didn't matter because he was absolutely fine. But the time Sita got abducted, grief took over. Why? Because of attachment. Hence Shankara said, Satsangatvam Nitsangatve. Release yourself from attachment, right? And of course, until he realized what his dharma was, that's when he went to save and fight. The rescue mission took place. Until he was crying, oh, I've lost, nothing happened. But the time he exercised discrimination and said, okay, my wife has been abducted, what should I do? I should go and find her. That time the grief stopped because intelligence began to work. I hope you can see whenever you are in a state of grief, right? Don't grieve all the time. You have to stop that grief and you have to think, what should I do? I've always used this example. You're walking and suddenly a thorn pricks your leg. You're holding your feet and you can see the thorn at the base of your feet. And you're shouting, pain, 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 pain. No, the pain will still be there. Why? Because the thorn is in there. Take out the thorn, put some medicine, and then you find that you've gone to the next stage. So grief is only a temporary stage. If you focus and remain in the state of grief, then you will not allow intelligence and discrimination to come and exercise itself on this situation, right? So we cannot avoid possession, action. Well, you can, but it takes time, right? Bad action gives sorrowful results, but still we do things that sometimes, the karma, good karma, bad karma thing. So one has to undergo and apply the teachings of the Gita and the Ramayana in order to lend themselves to a better life, to a better living, right? See, the word Rāmāyanam, Rāmāyanam, Rāmānyanam is actually what it means. Rāmānyanam, the jnanam that you should get. Jnanam is wisdom, right? The jnanam that you should get from Rama in order to live in this world righteously. I mean, just the name, right? Also, nothing gained in this world is permanent. Anitya. One of the Bhagavad Gita, Bhajagovindam shlokas, Nitya, Nitya. You must have the discrimination, sense of discrimination, which is, of course, empowered by intelligence to know what is impermanent from the permanent. So, naturally, the good results, if you do and you expect the results, again, now I'm going to the Gita. Gita says what? Do your action, don't expect the fruits. Give up even the fruits. That's renunciation. Whether it's good or bad, renounce it. I don't want it. You take it all. Because when you want it, then it does not discriminate whether wanting is good or bad. Both will come to you. But once you start renunciating, the same thing. Both will not come to you because you've renunciated the fruits of the action. Right? So it's over a period of time, you have to train yourself in order to give that up. All possessions and actions are tainted by sorrow. Wise men do not grieve over the arrival and departure of people, of objects, of situations in life. They just carry on. Like they say, life goes on. Remain calm and carry on. Right? So the real nature, another thing Ramayana teaches is the real nature of a person is not the body and certainly not the mind. It is pure consciousness. Chitananda Rupam Shivoham Shivoham I am Shiva. Right? That is eternal. That is the nature of unconditional happiness. But no, if we think the body and the mind is everything, then we are going to be stuck in this, right? A person's sense of security, peace, happiness does not depend on anything external. It depends on internal. His mind is internal, senses are internal, mind can control senses. So why do you look for things outside? He's really free from all emotional dependencies if he manages to sharpen the mind. Right? The only permanent solution to sorrow, my dear brothers and sisters, is knowledge. Knowledge of your own true nature. That's why when Swami always talks to us, he says, Prema Swarupas, embodiments of divine love. You are love, embodied in that self. Hence he says, love all, serve all, help ever, hurt never. Simple things. You don't have to know all this great Ithihasas. Ithihasam, right? This is what happened. Ramayana, Mahābhārata. As long as you can just love unconditionally, hey, you are Rama, you are Krishna, right? So you need to come out of all this that is actually trapped. You are trapped in all this, right? Your dislikes, your attachment, your pleasures, your uncontrolled mind, all this is a great hindrance to knowledge. Once you take off this one by one, and you're free of this, then you can go, right? Just like the Gita takes you from one level of consciousness to another level of consciousness, the Ramayana will do the same thing. Right? So what is Srimad Ramayana? In fact, I can tell you this thing in 7 lines. Right? In 7 lines, the entire Ramayana can be summed up. Adho Ramo Tapovananugamanam Hatva Mrigam Kanchanam Tu Vaidehi Haranam Jatha Yumaranam Tri Sugriva Sambhashanam 4 Bali Nigrahanam Samudra Tharanam 5 Lanka Puridahanam 6 Paschat Ravana Kumbhakarna Madhanam 7 Etat Ithi Ramayanaham. So 7 lines tells you the entire Ramayana, right? Hence we have 7 cantos or 7 chapters, right? So before we go into the actual Ramayana itself, a bit of history is important to see how it all came about. So why is it, firstly, you must ask yourself, why is it called Ramayanam? I said to you earlier, Ramanyanam, right? But why is it called Ramayana? Why is not Rama Katha? Because everywhere you see, the moment Ramayana is mentioned, somebody is telling you the Katha. Or if they are reading the story. But nobody actually tells you, what does this mean to me? Yeah, all good. Well, Ayodhya was Ayodhya, Dasharatha was Dasharatha, he had 3 wives, or they are all children. Okay. Today, how do I relate to that? No, because my children are not interested in me telling them a story. They say, Mom, Dad, don't tell me this. No. They want to know, look, I want to know how I can relate to this in my day-to-day life. So, as parents, what is your obligation? What is your dharma as a parent? What is your dharma as a parent to your children? Why is it not called Rama Katha or Rama Charitra? Why is it called Ramayanam? Because the jnanam is what? The intelligence is what you should be, right? Giving to the next generation by telling them this is how you apply it. It's a formula, like I said in the beginning. Ramayana is a formula for spiritual enlightenment. So you give them the formula and say, you apply the formula. You want answer, you apply the formula, right? I give you the problem, you apply the formula, you come up with the solution. There you go. So simple, right? Of course, if you look at the Vedas and the Upanishads, the Smritis, the Shastras, and of course the 2 great Ithihasas, Bhagavad Gita and Ramayana, they all tell us one thing, right? God incarnated in a specific form in order to impart a lesson, right? So what is the lesson that was imparted, and how are we practicalizing that lesson in our day-to-day lives? The Rama in Ramayana was the 7th incarnation, and Krishna was in Mahābhārata was the 8th incarnation. Rama was born in Treta Yuga, right? Rama avatar took place in Treta Yuga, and of course Krishna avatar took place in Dwapara Yuga. So the difference, as I said to you earlier, is Krishna was born with complete powers, right? That was his sankalpa for taking the avatar of Krishna. And Rama, again, Lord Vishnu, because of the problems, and I'm going to explain to you now how that came about, right? Why Rama had to be born as a normal person with no powers at all, and he was in complete, complete absence of that knowledge. He was born completely absent of the knowledge of who he was. So he was just a normal person, right? Now, so Ramanama Sahasranama, right? Ramanama Sahasranama. So repeating the name of Rama once is repeating the name of Rama. It's like repeating the name of others. And I said to you, it's Taraka Rama. It can even remove Sharpa, curses, divine Sharp, So Ra, Ma. Ra, I told you, comes from Narayana. Ma comes from Maheshwara. But if you look at Rama, the word Rama, if you put Bha before it, it becomes Brahma. So Rama actually represents the Trinity, forces of creation, sustenance, and dissolution. Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Narayana, Ra. Maheshwara, Ma. Brahma, Rama. Brahma, Rama, right? So you will see that Brahma, if you look at how these 3 people operate, right? One creates, one sustains, and one solves, resolves, dissolves, whatever you want to call it. Solve is the key word there, right? Something to create, something to hold, and something to bring it to a level of non-existence. So Brahma is the one who always is worshipped for a boon, because he's the creator. He creates this sort of energies. And it is always either Vishnu or Shiva who are required to come and solve the problems created by the boons granted by Brahma, right? And this is where we come to look at Valmiki, when he wrote the Ramayana, right? He wrote it in 7 cantos, or 7 karanas, or 7 kandas, as they say, right? The 7 cantos, 500 paragraphs, and almost 24 to 25,000 verses. As I said, it is not necessary for you and me to go through all those 24,000 verses, right? It is enough for us to know the power behind the name. So even if you say Sri Ramajay, just we say Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Shri Ram is enough. And that's what Hanuman used to say. If Hanuman became so powerful, right? If we are worshipping a monkey as God, that means there must be something that is allowing us to worship a monkey as God. And what is that thing? That thing is what I said to you earlier: faith, devotion, and of course, surrender, total surrender. When he say Jai Shri Ram, he's totally surrendered. That who takes over then once you've totally surrendered? In my last one, when I did faith, fear, and surrender, I spoke to you about Gajendra Moksham. How only when the elephant surrendered, instantly Vishnu came and saved him. Like that. And the name and the thought is so powerful. The thought behind the power of the name. So when you say Sri Satya Sai, is different from Sri Satya Sai. Where? The amount of faith, So in 2018, at the Brahma Utsavam celebration in the Lakshmi Narayana temple in London, they had asked me to be the keynote speaker for 7 days. And they said, it'd be great if you can talk about the Ramayana. Now, a couple of months before that, I had done, for 10 weeks, I had done a basic course in Hinduism, looking at all the God forms. It was ideal because when I talk about Ganesha, I can show them where Lord Ganesha is, and I can go through the forms, the symbolisms, and relate it to practical living. And I did that with, Ganesha, I did that with Subramanya, Muruga. I did that with the Trinities, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Durga, Lakshmi, Saraswati, right? I did with Gayatri Devi, 10 weeks. So they had given me in the temple. See, I'm now telling you this story because I want to tell you the power of the thought when you connect with God. They had given me a specific place right in front of the Sanctum Sanctorium. They put a little, base, nice carpet. And then they asked me to sit on the carpet. And I was talking, there's about 30, 40 people coming every Sunday afternoon. Then when this happened in Brahmotsam, the first day I went, wearing my usual, ochre robes. And I went and I'm looking because the temple was really crowded because the Brahmotsavam, Brahmotsavam is the yearly anniversary celebrations of the temple anniversary. And I went to pray. I prayed, I did my usual things. And then I went to Rama. And I'm thinking, I'm going to be talking about you. Please bless me, guide me, guard me. And how wonderful if you will allow me to sit in front of you so that I know you are at the back of me. You are there, Lakshmana is there, Sita is there, and certainly Hanuman is there. If you are behind me, what fear do I have? That is my thought that was going on when I was standing in front of the Rama sanctum and I was praying. Then, of course, the temple trustees came and said, brother, you are going to sit here and pray. Where? Exactly the place where they told me for the last 10 weeks I've been doing that, right? And I'm thinking, okay, this is the play of God. As I was going to sit down, the Acharya, the chief priest, comes and he takes me by hand and he says, no, you don't sit here. You come and sit here. I'm thinking, where is he going to take me? And where does he take me? Right in front of Rama. He puts a chair there. He covers it with a cloth, and then he says, from here he said, as an Acharya, you're going to talk about Rama. You talk from this position. And right in front of me is like a 30-feet statue of Hanuman. I mean, what fantastic strategic positioning is that? You talk about GPS, that is fantastic GPS for me. Behind, Rama, Lakshmana, Sita, and Hanuman. In front, 100%, 35 feet to 40 feet of Hanuman standing there. What fear do I have? What can come from behind? What can come from in front? Total surrender. See, the thought is so powerful. I said, Rama, how nice. Only you can do this. Then it was taken, you see, for a moment, I was taken and said, no, that's not going to happen. You're going to sit here, according to the trustees. Then the chief priest comes and he takes me and he says, no, Acharya, you sit here. How fantastic is that? So, I mean, that is the consciousness in your thought. When you say the name of God, you must think about the conscious power to put inside the name, then you empower the name of God. Like I always say, your bhakti is my Shakti, says God, says Swami. The more your bhakti, the greater my Shakti. The less your bhakti, the lesser my Shakti. Directly proportionate. So faith, again, coming back to what I did on faith, fear. Where there is fear, faith will be reduced. Where there is fear, faith will not allow you to surrender. So take out the fear, with faith you surrender and leave it. My God. So the 7 kandas, 7 cantos, you are looking at Balakanda, Book of Youth. 77 chapters on this. 77. And then we have Ayodhya Khanda, book of Ayodhya, 119 chapters. This is like the second largest chapter in the Ithihasa, Ramayana, right, in the poetry. Then we have Aranya Khanda, the book of the forest. This is Rama and Lakshmana and Sita in the forest, right? 75 chapters. Of course, I said all the chapters you add, just like, we had 18 chapters in Mahābhārata, Bhagavad Gita, and then they each have certain number of stanzas, isn't it? Like that. Then comes, so we have Balakanda, Ayodhya Khanda, Aranya Khanda, Kishkinda Khanda, the fourth one. Kishkinda. This is the empire of the monkeys. 67 chapters. Then we have Sundara Kanda. It's very, very important, right? Sundara Kanda, when I tell you, when I talk to you in about 4 or 5 weeks, it is the secret of resolving problems in your life. Just reading Sundara Kanda. 100%. I am even, I can go to the extent of giving it to you in writing and putting my name down. And, we lawyers never do that. Right? Sundara Kandam. 68 chapters. Yuddha Khandam, the book of war, the largest chapter in the entire thing, 128 chapters. And of course, Uttara Khandam, the book of finality, or the book of answers, or the book of return, right? That has 111 chapters. Balakanda is about the young Rama, details of his birth, early life in Ayodhya, his slaying of the demons when Vishwamitra came and took him in the early teens. Dasharatha was distraught. He said, no, take my entire army. They are very powerful. No. Vishwamitra said, I want Rama. Right? So when I talk to you about Balakanta next week, I'll give you more details. Then Ayodhya Khanda is, of course, Dasharatha has to, honor his promise made to his third wife, Kaikeyi. And then, of course, the start of Rama's exile, which takes us into the book of forest, Aranya Khanda. Then, of course, in Aranya Khanda, they were happy for a while, and then Sita gets a desire for the golden deer, and then she gets separated, and of course, they go and look for it, and they go to the monkey kingdom. That brings us to Kishkinda Khanda, right? Then, of course, the trials and tribulations and the cooperation between Rama, Lakshmana, and the monkeys bring us to Hanuman, and Hanuman, of course, takes us to the next Khanda, which is Sundara Khanda, where Hanuman travels to Lanka, finds Sita, brings back the good news, all that. See, a problem will have a resolution. And that is the fundamental symbolism of Sundara Khanda, right? Then, of course, Yuddha Khanda is the book of war. What happens? Rama-Ravana war, right? And, of course, the successful victory, and then returning to Ayodhya for his coronation, which brings us to the last, the epilogue, Uttara Khanda, which details the life of Rama and Sita after their return. And of course, there are problems there as well, right? So we need to look at Rama in separation. He has got divisible personalities because he's playing different roles, right? Certainly, you and I, we don't do the same thing to everybody we know in our life, isn't it? Like I said, you're a husband, you have husband duties. You're a wife, you have husband, dharma of a wife. You're a son, you're dharma of a son. You're a daughter, you're dharma of a daughter. You're a father, dharma of a father. You are a son, so you have dharma of a son. You have dharma of a father to your son, dharma of a friend, dharma of a teacher, dharma of a colleague. Surely you're not going to act and react and respond in the same way in every single capacity. No. So when we look at Rama, we got to look at what dharma is he playing. So if he's a king, then he's Raja Dharma. You cannot look at him as Pati Dharma, husband Dharma, no. Right? And this was verily what Krishna told Arjuna. You are a Kshatriya, you're a warrior, your job is to fight. Don't look at your cousins, your grandfather, your no. Yuga Dharma, right? Yuddha Dharma you have to look at. So, just as I did with you in the Gita, my sole intention is to squeeze the essence out of each kanta, the chapter, and give you what you need to live in this day and age, right? Squeeze. So I give you the juice. Don't come and ask me, where did you buy the oranges from? Absolutely no point, right? The juice is solid. Drink the juice and say, wow, what lovely amrita. And go, right? Which shop you bought, how much 1 kilo, all that is absolutely useless. And that is what we spend our time, precious time, doing. Asking all irrelevant questions which serves no purpose at all in life, right? So I will tell you the story, what happened, but more importantly, I will tell you what is it about each of the story that relates to you and me today. Physical transformation, personal transformation, right? That is what you and I hopefully will get out of this, right? It's called transformation through information, and that's what we're going to be doing, right? So let's talk about how this whole thing came about, right? So we go back in time to the kingdom called Koshala kingdom, right? Where, of course, the great king Dasharatha ruled. Now, everybody knows Dasharatha as the father of Rama. But Dasharatha himself, if you take Rama out of the equation, he was a very, very well-known and powerful king who ruled righteously over many, 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 many years, right? Of course, in those days, we are talking about Brahmic years. Now we talk about human years. I think I've explained in one of the Karma talks, the Brahma year and the human year is completely different, right? The calculation, the mathematics behind it is different. So if you read, depends where you read, right? And the net is not your go-to when you want to look at, a fundamental truth about all these Ithihasas. Your net is not the place, right? So sometimes you read in certain places, Dasharatha ruled the Koshala kingdom for 60,000 years. Don't panic. It doesn't mean 60,000 human years, right? It means it is a reflection of a time in that yuga. And I'm talking about Treta Yugam, right? Now, of course, it's Kali Yugam, human years, right? So it's called Yuga Dharma. You have to look at the yuga in different, calculations. Satya Yuga was different, Treta Yuga was different, Dwapara Yuga was different, and now certainly Kali Yuga is going to be different, right? So what does Dasharatha mean? Earlier I said to you, means 10 senses, right? 5 senses of action, 5 senses of perception. But no, Dasharatha, and Swami has spoken about this, right? If you read Ramakatha Rasavahini, he'll tell you, right? Part 1. He says, Dasha means 10, Ratha means chariot. So how does that connect? Dasharatha means one who can ride his chariot in 10 different directions. So how is it possible, 10 different directions, right? So you have, apart from the senses, right? Senses of action and senses of perception, jnana indriya and karma indriyas. You also have, where, for example, one who has mastered the 5 senses of action and the 5 senses of perception can be called Dasharatha, because you have mastered those senses, and therefore you can ride your chariot. What is a chariot? Chariot of intelligence in 10 different directions. So Dasharatha was known as a powerful king. He was a fantastic warrior because he could ride his chariot in 10 different directions. What 10 different directions? Now, normally, when I've done pujas, or when, the acharyas in the temple do the pujas, they do something before they actually start the puja. This is called Ashtatik Palaka Puja. Ashta means 8, Dikpalaka means 8, primordial deities guarding the 8 directions. You have north, south, east, west, right? So you have northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest, 8 directions. And in the Hindu Sampradaya, each direction has a guardian deity. So they do this Ashtadik Palaka Puja, which is 8, and then 1, Akasha, and 1 down, Bhumi, Prithvi. 8 plus 2, 10. So Dasharatha was a fantastic warrior because he could ride his chariot in any of these directions, including up and down. So he was known as Dasharatha. Now, obviously, I will also, when I talk about Aranyakandam, later I will explain to you why Rama had to go away for 14 years. 14 years because you have the Shapta Lokas. 7 Lokas up, 7 Lokas down. And this is part and parcel of the Gayatri mantra, right? 7 Lokas up, Bhu, Bhuva, Suvaha, Mahaha, Janaha, Tapaha, Hum Satyam, right? 7. Then if you go down, Athala, Vithala, Suthala, Kalatala, Rasatala, Mahatala, and Patala, 7. 14 years represents the grooming of the intelligence from the lower base levels and then the rising to the higher levels of spiritual enlightenment. So as an incarnation, he didn't know that he was incarnation. I told you, he's born as a very, very normal human being. He didn't know. So he had to go through this 14 years, right? In order to, more about that in Aranyakanda. So he was, Dasharatha was a very, very powerful king, successful ruler, very dharmic ruler. All of that was good, but he was very, very sad because he had no children. There was no heir to the throne. So he was very sad. And one day he went to the Kula Guru. Rama Kula, the Guru is Vashishta Maharishi, right? So Dasharatha approached him and he said, Vashishta, Guruji, Maharishi, what is going to happen? Because I don't have any sons or daughters. What is going to happen to my kingdom? Why am I not gifted with a child? So Vashishta meditated and he said, no, you can get a child. You have to do 2 types of yajnas. Yajnas means, the fire, sacrificial fire. So one is called Ashwamedha Yajna. Ashwa means 10, Medha means horses. So it's a yajna that involves 10 horses, right? Now, a lot of people think, oh, Chandi Homa means, throwing a full-blown cow into the fire. And this Ashwamedha Yajna means, throwing 10 horses. No. It means the symbolic significance of mantras that is equivalent to a life of a horse. So Ashwamedha Yajna means whereby mantric vibrations, we are sacrificing the horse without actually touching them. But the horses are brought to the fire so that we can connect the energy, right? Then they are released. They are released after that. Now, first he said, you must do the Ashwamedha Yajna. And when you finish that, then only you are entitled to do the second Yajna, which is Putra Kameshti Yajna. Putra Kameshti Yajna. That means only when you do the 2 together, then you will get your son. And Dasharatha said, okay, this is all okay, very, very good news. So when to do, where to do, how to do, why to do, all that he asked. And then, Dasharatha was asking Vashishta, and Vashishta tells him, he said, you have to go and find a rishi called Rishyamukha Rishi. I think I told you this Rishyamukha story in one of my reflection series that comes out every Thursday, right? Rishyamukha Rishi. Where do I find him? Asks Dasharatha. Vashishta says he's in Sringeri. And Sringeri, as you know, is one of the Peedam for Adi Shankara, where he set up the Shankara Piracharya, 4 Peedams. One of the 4 in India, the 4 corners like that. So Dasharatha goes, he seeks Rishyamukha Rishi, who's the only one with whom Vashishta said can perform these 2 yajnas. So he comes back with Rishyamukha Rishi and they start preparing for the Ashwamedha Yajna, after which they were going to do the Putra Kameshti Yajna. Now, all this is happening on earth, in Bhuloka, in the Koshala kingdom, in the city called Ayodhya. But while this is happening here on earth, Brahma is being visited in Brahmaloka by all the Devas. So they all come to him and say, Brahma, 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 Brahma. Brahma says, yes, why have you all come? Oh, we have a problem. So what is your problem? The problem you have caused. What do you mean the problem I have caused? Yes, because you have given this Ravana the boon. Now he is coming and terrorizing the Bhuloka, the Bhuloka, and the Subaloka. Now we as Devas, our Devaloka is now in his hands. So something must be done. Somebody needs to control. Who can we go to? So Brahma thought for a while. He said, okay, let's go to Vishnu, right? Let's go to Vishnu. Because, Brahma as the creator, he always tells us, if you want to transcend from the level of Manusha to Purusha, from man to God, then you must not use your Pushtaka. You must use your Mashtaka. Pushtaka is books. Bookish knowledge is no good. You must use your Mashtaka, divine knowledge, wisdom. Then only you can go to Devaloka, right? Now, so he said, okay, let's go to see Vishnu. Because, Indra is there, Surya is there, Agni is there, Vayu is there, all the Devas are there. They said, look, we have a problem, Ravana is terrorizing us. What do we do? You gave Ravana a boon. Now he wants to control all the Trilokas, Bhuloka, Soloka. So we have no choice. Somebody needs to stop him. And, because you have given him the boon, you say Tatastu to everything. Now there is no Astu for us. Leave alone Tatastu. So he said, okay, let's go and see Vishnu, right? Now, this is what Brahma told all the Devas who had come with the problem, right? When you go and see Vishnu, you must be prepared to surrender your problems to Vishnu. Don't just tell him the problem and come back and try and deal with it, right? This is what we do. Sometimes we are depressed or we are sad or we, feel disillusioned and we want to go to the temple. You go to the temple, you talk to God, or at least I hope you talk to God there, right? Not to all your friends whom you've seen, after a while. That's what happens in temples anyway. People use it as a social ground, right? If you doubt me, Find a temple that is absolutely silent in prayer. Find a temple and tell me where it is, because I want to go there. Find a temple that is absolutely silent because everybody is praying. No, don't find it. Even when the Abhishekam is going on, even when the puja, the priests are chanting in there, Sahasra Sirisha Purusha, you're talking, hey, the party next week will go, okay, you pick me up now. Then how? When you go to the house of God and insult God, you think that's dharmic? So find me a temple where everybody is praying in silence. I'd like to go there. So Brahma tells the Devas, if you go, you have to surrender, right? That is why Ramayana, if you look from the Shastra point of view, it is called another name for Ramayana, right? Valmiki called it Ramayana. But if you look from the Shastra's perspective, there is another name for Ramayana, and it is called Sharanagati Shastra. Sharanagati Shastra, right? It means surrender. So Brahma takes all the Devas and they go to Vaikunta, right? And they tell Vishnu, Narayana, Mahadeva, Vaikunta Vasa, Lakshmi Priya, Hari Priya, they call him by all his names, and then they said, we have a problem. So Vishnu asks, what is the problem? Then Brahma with the Devas, they share the problem. And Vishnu says, the difference between Devas and Asuras. Now here I'm talking about what I spoke to you in chapter 16 of Bhagavad Gita, right? The qualities, right? The difference between the Devas and the Asuras is the Devas are in a comfort zone. Why? Because they have this Amrita and they know they have, life that never ends. They have immortality. You remember the story of the churning of the ocean of milk between the Devas and the Asuras, and then of course the poison came out, then the Amrit came out, and the Amrit was given to, all of that, right? Anyway, so is it you guys, Devas, you are in a comfort zone. But you look at the Asuras, they know they are downtrodden, they know they are less powerful. How then do they become so powerful? So Vishnu asks the Devas this. And they all say, we don't know. Let me tell you. While the Devas are lacking in this, the Asuras have something called Eka Drishti. Eka Drishti means one-pointed devotion, one-pointed concentration, one-pointed focus. Eka Drishti. That is why when they sit and do tapasya, they will do it until Brahma comes before them and they get the boon. Every single time I have told you about Asuras becoming powerful, right? It is through tapasya. They have sat, meditated, they have done all the ritualistic things in order to beget that boon from Brahma. Ekadrishti. I haven't told you this Deva did this puja, Indra did this puja, Surya did this puja, Chandra did this puja. No. Because they are in the comfort zone. Now you translate this to today's life. If you sit in your comfort zone, you will not evolve if you don't get involved with your discrimination and intellect. Simple. Have ekadrishti, one-pointed devotion, one-pointed concentration, one-pointed focus, then you'll be fine. Okay? So what was the boon granted by Brahma to Ravana? Vishnu is asking. Of course, it's not like Vishnu doesn't know, but because when you go to the problem, it's good to ask you, why are you here? What happened? Why did it happen? How did it happen? So Vishnu is asking all this, right? He said, what boon did Brahma give to Ravana? Well, Ravana said, he cannot be killed. One of the most powerful person in the three lokas, right? Three loka Shiranjeevi, And he says, I cannot be killed by any Purushas, any Yakshas, any Gandharvas. That means God, goddesses, devas, any animals or a combination of anything. Now, he only did not mention two categories. One was the human race, because he thought, if I'm going to be most powerful, devas and gods and goddesses can't kill me. What can a normal human person do? So he left that out. And he also said, monkeys, harmless creatures. They can't do anything to me. So he left two categories called Naraha. Naraha means human being, and Vanaraha means monkeys. And that is why this whole thing came about between man and his partnership with monkey to defeat someone who's as powerful as Ravana. Right? Va in Tamil means also is a short for Val. Val means tail. So if you take away va from vanaraha, it becomes naraha. So if you take the tail from humans, they become from monkey to human. Hence the connection between naraha, human, and vanaraha, monkeys. Right? We all have a tail, right? The tail is the mind. The monkey mind is the tail. The tail goes up and down, left and bottom, right, and all of that. So that's where the problems are created, because our mind, that is just like the tail of the monkey, is sustained through our kriyas. Our kriyas are powers of action. Powers of action. And the way we get the fruits is as a consequences of actions, isn't it? So learn to control that tail for monkey. Learn to control that tail, which is the mind for human beings. So Vishnu says, okay, that means I cannot go down in any form. I have to take a birth as a normal human person without any powers, without any godly, powers, without any divine powers, and I can only use monkeys to help me to achieve this. He thinks for a while. He said, okay, fine. He says, Indra, you will be born as Vali. He says, Surya, you will be born as Sugriva. Then he calls Vishwakarma, one of the devas. Vishwakarma, as you know, is a celestial architect. He says, Vishwakarma, you will be born as Nala. And he calls Agni Deva. Agni Deva, come here. You will be born as Nila. Now, I am sure you remember reading from various sources, right? Nala and Nila are the two architects responsible, or monkey architects, responsible for building the bridge between Rameshwaram and Lanka. And of course, especially Nala, because he is actually Vishwakarma. Vishwakarma, who is the celestial architect responsible for the grandeur of the Brahmaloka and the Vaikuntha, like that. So, and of course, Vishwakarma was also the person responsible for locating and strategically putting where the Shabarimala temple is at the moment. Right? Because Parashurama came and called him and he said, right, you shoot this arrow. Where it falls, that is where the temple of Ayyappa Swami will be consecrated. And he shot and it fell on the Shabarimala hills. And that is why Shabarimala has become so divine, so holy, right? So all these people were drafted in. Right? Indra, you are born as Vali. Surya, you are born as Sugriva. Vishwakarma, Nala. Agnideva, Nila. I shall be born as Rama. All this was taking place in Vaikuntha. Remember what is happening in Bhuloka? The preparations for the Ashwamedha Yajna was taking place between, the King Dasharatha and Rishi Rishyamukha and Vashishta overlooking. Of course, once they finish the Ashwamedha Yajna, they will go on to do the Putra Kameshti Yajna. Right? Now, as Vishnu is saying, okay, I will then be born as a normal person, Rama, without any powers, just very normal person, right? Suddenly, Adishesha, who's Adishesha, right? Adishesha is the 1,000-headed serpent he sleeps on. Adishesha says, Bhagavan, Mam ekam sharanam brajaha. You, in all this Dashavataram, you have said that you will not forsake me. Mam suchaha. You told me, don't worry, wherever you go, you will take me. How can you then leave me and go to Bhuloka to take birth as Rama? How can I stay without you? What do you think Vishnu told Adishesha? He said, Adishesha, you will come with me and you will be born as Lakshmana. That is why Rama and Lakshmana were inseparable, wherever, from the time they were teenagers, into the forest together, because Adishesha and Vishnu. Fantastic. Now, when Adishesha was given that, what does Vishnu hold in his hands? He is known as Chang Chakra Gadadhari. Chang, Chakra, Sudarshana Chakra. Chang is the conch, Chakra is the disc, and Gada, Gadam. These guys didn't keep quiet. They said, Gadam said, okay, you will come with me, but you will be my bow and arrow. So Gada was happy. Shanga and Chakra. Now, Rama, Vishnu, Adishesha, Lakshmana. Shanga and Chakra. They're saying, don't leave us and go. You can take Adishesha. What about us? We don't exist without you. So Vishnu thinks and he says, okay, Shank, the conch, you will be born as Bharata. And Chakra, it's called Sudarshana Chakra. You will be born as Shatraguna. And you see, now everybody is coming down. It's a teamwork, team, T-E-A-M. Together, everyone achieves more. Right? You want a modern acronym for that. Yeah. So let's go and sort this one out. So said Vishnu. Then who should come and say, hang on a minute. Who have I left out? Just think for a minute. Who is sitting at the feet of Mahavishnu, who's lying on Adishesha, holding Shanga, Chakra and Gada? Mahalakshmi. Mahalakshmi says, how are you being fed? You are taking Surya, you're taking Agni, you're taking Indra, you're taking Nila as, Vishwakarma. You're taking your Shanga, you're taking your Chakra, you're taking Adishesha, you're taking your Gada. What about me here? What is going to happen to me? That's when Vishnu says, my dear, you will be born as Brahmajnani Sita, and I will come and seek you when the time is right. Right? So one thing became very clear in that place is none of us will remember we are all gods or have godly powers. Devas won't remember who they are. So, Sugriva was Sugriva, Vali was Vali. They don't know they are some incarnation, right? In fact, Ravana also previously was an incarnation. This whole thing came about because Ravana wanted to be close to Vishnu and never. He is one of the guardians. And I'll tell you the story later, right? So all the Hindu, gods and goddesses, right? They're called different names, right? But only two amongst this have got the title of Ishwaran. One is Ravana, so he's called Ravaneshwaran, and the other is Lord Shani, one of the 9 Navagraha planets. So he's called Shanishwaran. Only two have got Ishwaran, right? You don't call Shiva Ishwaran. You don't call Vishnu Ishwaran. No, right? This is a title given to Ravana, Ravaneshwaran, Sanishwaran, right? Now, Ravaneshwaran, I told you, 4 heads, 6 heads, 10 heads. 4 represents Vedas, 4 Vedas, 6 represents 6 Shastras. So the 4 Vedas, Rig, Yajur, Sama and Atharvana. The 6 Shastras, what are they? This is what, is telling you what a learned, what a supremely knowledgeable person Ravana was. Hence the title Ravaneshwaran. That is why Vishnu couldn't come alone. He had to come with his entire team. Because otherwise Ravaneshwaran was invincible. 6 Shastras is called Sankhya Shastra, which is mathematics. Yoga Shastra, which is yogas. Nyaya Shastra, which is law and regulation. Vaisheshik Shastra, which is, what we call the pantheon of circulation, right? That means everything that goes round, that has life, cycle of life. Then Purva Mimsa Shastra, and of course Uttara Mimsa Shastra. Yeah, my God, he squeezed all the Shastras and, like a drink, and he's drunk it. So he's a complete owner of all this knowledge. That is why when I speak to you about Yuddha Kandam during the war, I will tell you how, as a Brahmana, he came to help to do Rama's father's, Dasharatha's prayers. We'll talk about that when I do Yuddha Kandam, right? So this was what we call Yuddha Dharma. Even in war, there is righteousness, right conduct. And, when I was talking to you about Bhagavad Gita, I said, sunrise, conch is blown. War, I fight you, you fight me. I kill you, you kill me. Sunset, conch is blown. And then, of course, everybody helps each other in different camps, right? So even in a battlefield, there is in Yuddha Dharma, a battle of just war. Right? In law, we study just war, right? So whether you are going through the Ramayana or the Mahābhārata, the lesson is the same. They all came together as a team, not just Vishnu, and nobody knew who they were actually, they all came to do a job. And once the job was done, then divine comes and says, by the way, Rama, you are not Rama, you are Mahavishnu. Sita, of course, in the story, Sita returns to Bhumi Devi. just as where she was found by King Janaka, her father, she returns to the same Bhumi Devi. Bhumi Devi gave her, right? She was not born out of anyone. Brahmajnani, the divine Mother Earth, Bhumi Devi gave her, and the divine Mother Earth also took her back at one specific time. And this exactly reiterates what, the fantastic saying, Yada yada hi dharmasya glahinit bhavati bharata pyutthanam adharmasya tathatmanam sajamyaham paritranaya sadhuna vinashaya chatuskritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. So, in the heavens, preparations were made for them to come down. On earth, preparations were made to do this. See, this is the incidence that's happening. And then at one point, both will coincide and all of them are born. Right? That I will talk to you next week when I do Balakandam, the book of youth. Right? Ramaya Ramabhadraya Ramachandraya Vedase Raghunathaya Nathaya Sitayam Pataye Namaha Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Saishwararpanamastu Anyada Sharanam. Sai Ram.